Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of BLS Show and Tell. Today with Thomas Burleson. Thomas, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's awesome. We're going to talk about React today. I think this is a primer on BLS. I've been doing quite a lot of Angular, Nest, NX, and related technologies, but few people know I spend about half of my time developing in React as well. And I think Thomas and I share quite a few similarities on coming from Angular and getting into React. And to the extent that Thomas created a library or a set of libraries for React that bring some of the goodies in Angular. So this is going to be interesting, I think, for a lot of devs that work with either. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you about React Akita, what made you create it. But first of all, I would love to hear a little bit about what you do, who you are, and all that kind of stuff.
No problem. So I've been writing software for, excuse me, almost 30 years. And currently I serve a role as a technical leadership and guidance and as a solutions architect. So I work with a lot of enterprise teams and development teams, mostly in the US boundaries, but occasionally outside of that, within sometimes New Zealand and Australia and other places. And my focus for the last 20 years has been on the front end solutions. In fact, I started writing commercial software with one of the first email programs that ever came out. And I've remained steadfast, even though for a while I went to the Java backend into Code Fusion and a few other content management systems. I remained steadfast on sort of the front end. And for a while, I was engaged with Google at the team lead for Angular Material. Then I was the architect for Flex Layout, Angular Flex Layout. And then I spun off from there, and I was doing some work with Narwhal.io as one of their principal architects, working with Victor and Jeff Cross. And that was a really great engagement. And helping them really present Angular solutions and architectures and mentoring and best practices to enterprises.
Right.
After Narwhal, I went off and I started then really diving into React. I did Angular since 2009, so between 8 and 10 years, depending on how you look at it. And I wanted to change a venue, and I decided to start really looking into React. And I fell in love with React, but I also found lots of things about the way people develop applications in React that I didn't like. And one of them was related to state management.
Yeah, I think this is one of my biggest issues. I really have a hard time orchestrating it all together. I love how fast you can do stuff and how fast you can split out a component, and there's little ceremony for a lot of things. But I personally still struggling, for instance, to get a good flow if you're not logged in, to make sure that your login page doesn't render, or if you're logged in. So kind of the life cycle kind of things, and sharing code and doing dependency injection. This has been like still something I really miss.
Right, even if you're using NX, right, NX workspaces for mono repositories and doing code collaboration with teams. Yeah. And you can do that with a mixture of front end and back end solutions, right? So you could have an Angular app and a React app and Nest JS middle tier server or a Next server, GraphQL, all that. When we come from developers who are coming from Angular, what happens is we're used to the layered approach, right? We're used to certain conventions and things like dependency injection, class-based types of approaches instead of more procedural or functional approaches. Right. And we're also used to, at least those of us in recent years within Angular, we're used to really sophisticated options for state management. NGRX, for example, is an amazing solution, right? It's just Brandon and Mike Ryan did a fantastic job of sort of spearheading that effort. And I love NGRX. Now, granted, I gradually moved away from there and started looking at just using not so much NGRX, but how could one take these various concepts of how you approach state management and use that just in an agnostic way. And then I discovered Akita, which we'll talk about in a bit. And once I really firmly stepped over into the React boundaries, I realized several things. First, React at the time didn't have dependency injection, and I don't care what you say, that React doesn't have true dependency injection. Yes, React has context, and that's pretty darn cool, right?
Yeah.
I really love React. Don't get me wrong,
yeah.
but React does not have DI.
Yeah.
And DI isn't just about lookup; it's about instantiation and configuration and mocking.
Right.
And you should be able to do that within the view hierarchy and outside the view hierarchy. You
Right.
can't do that with context, right? You can hack it. So part of the library that you're going to see that we're going to be talking about today has a true Angular-like DI system that's available for React.
Right.
But the other thing that I really loved about React, and this plays into state management and RxJS and NGRX, was this idea of we want to create applications that are reactive. Yeah. And what I mean by that is that we want our UI and maybe even our non-UI components, our services, to react to changes in data that we're observing or watching. Yeah. So when that data changes, we don't care how it changes. When it changes, we want to either update our UI or let's say I'm a UI component. I just want to re-render it, yeah. Right? And if we do it right, this is what NGRX and Redux promotes. If we do it right, if the user interacts with a view component, that interaction is delegated to someplace else other than the UI, right? Because that interaction may modify the data, the state, and then something happens. And if we think of this state management as a black box, something happens inside this black box, and then that's maybe in the future or right away, could be asynchronous, that data changes, that state changes. Anyone on the outside needs to then be notified and then respond or react. And so that's where we talk about reactive. And with Angular, we had this amazing tool or feature called the Async Pipe. So many people don't understand the incredible power of the Async Pipe. Now, Async pipes are really all about streams, right? They're about RxJS streams. And with the power comes the ability to rapidly kill yourself. Like you can really box yourself into a dead end and go and just get lost. Mm-hmm. And the async pipe helps solve so many of those problems. So what does it do? It basically says, hey, with an RxJS stream, I'm not actually going to get any data until I say that I'm ready to listen for it. That's one of the features of an RxJS stream. And the async pipe basically says, you give me a stream and I'll watch it. And when the data comes out of that stream, I will extract that data out into a variable and tell the template, the component, to re-render, right? But it does more than that. It also says, if you give me a new stream, and this is what most people don't know, is if you give me a new stream, so you told me to watch stream 1, and I'm watching for it, but if for some reason you give me a whole new stream, I will disconnect from stream 1 and I'll reconnect to stream 2 and do the same thing again. And so it handles unsubscribing and automated features like that, right? So within Angular, we have this power. When you came over for developers who then come to React, there is no such thing as an async pipe. Well, there is a very creative solution originally created called a use observable. So let me back up. So within React, because I get excited about this, V. So within React, there, if we have the async pipe that triggers UI component re-renderings, do we have something equivalent for that in React? And the answer is yes, we do. We have React hooks. And React hooks, if they're managing whatever state you tell them to manage, and we'll take a look at some code for that. When the hook triggers, when the state changes within the hook actually then triggers the UI component through a React fiber to basically re-render. Now, it almost looks like it's re-entering code because it comes back into the hook again and says, okay, give me your current data. But there is that feature that if the state changes, the hook basically automatically triggers its associated component to re-render.
Right.
That's cool. But what happens if you're using streams? Well, just like in Angular, you don't want to go down the route of manually trying to subscribe and manage that nonsense. Yeah. So there is a custom hook called use observable. And in the Mindspace library, there's a version of that that's very much gives you all the power that you have in the async pipe, and so it handles those features. But it still doesn't address the issue of, well, how do you manage sophisticated state or even trivial state. And I think that's what we'll explore in a bit.
Very cool. Yeah, very cool. I think, I'm not sure if I really right here, but I think React is not really making an honor to its name to be really reactive. And I often felt when I started out, they should have called it re-render, because I have the feeling it re-renders every time when I really don't really intend to, and it does so anyway. I was doing a lot of things wrong, but also I never had real guidance in how to do it. I basically dove in because it's super low-level entry. You don't have to know basically anything. It's super easy. I really like the functional approach. I wish Angular had something like just do a function, return a blob of template, but I understand it's not this easy in doing this in Angular. So there's a lot of things I like, but I also think it's a tool that it's very easy to mess up. And I think looking at a lot of React projects, it's kind of a testament to this, because there's a lot of projects that do work, but it's definitely not a very welcoming environment. A lot of projects are not good ways to learn these things.
React is super easy to get started. Where people have a problem with it is to scale it, like when you're working with teams. And when we come from Angular, because of some of the conventions, we rapidly learn that we need to do these things because we're really more working with it as a team, right? And so you pay that consequence. And there are different patterns we apply, approaches we take to writing code in Angular, just like there's different approaches we take to writing code in React. And I love how easy it is to create view components. The only thing I recommend to React developers is always think of the layered approach. What happens if I challenge a developer or any other developer and I said, listen, think of your UI as cosmetic makeup on top of an engine that's non-UI. The engine handles all your workflow, your business logic, your data services, your data, all that. And it might even handle events, just like we might do in Redux, right? Where we might say, save emails, load emails, it would handle this. So if we think of it that way, then the UI is what I meant by this makeup. Now that the UI can be complicated. It could be lots of components and all that. So we have to start with React. You have to start thinking about, is it a presentation component or a smart component? Is it does it have children or not? Where does it get its data or its properties from the parent? And then you start thinking about, well, what's going to trigger a re-render? And this then helps guide. So if you take these thoughts and then you apply the layered approach, which is, in my opinion, functional view components, hooks, and then the business layer. So the hooks, you notice, is that middle layer between that. It's a little bit more associated with the UI, but it's also associated with the business logic, right? Because the hook triggers the UI to re-render, but the hook also talks to the non-business. So if you think of that approach, then all of a sudden writing React apps is pretty, I say this with quotes, pretty easy.
Relatively. I really liked this guidance, and what really helped me was the book you probably know, Enterprise Angular Apps by Narwhal, 2018, where they separated out between data access libs, feature libs, and UI libs and utility libs.
That's right.
And you might have had a hand in this convention at some point, I can imagine. So data access is everything that you basically don't see, provides data, models.
That's right.
Things you provide. The feature are the things you actually route to. So these are things that are routed to generally, that tie things together, talk to the database. But what I tend to say, these things shouldn't have like classes, CSS classes, because if you're styling it in there, you probably want to do it to a UI library, and that's like the dump components, if you will. I don't really like the term, but presentational components is a better word. I think I got this in the app that we're looking at. I need to peek in it because I'm not really sure how far I got into this approach. But having this convention from Angular made my React app better, and the apps from the teams I work with as well, because I work with a lot of teams and I try to propose structure to them. And then all of a sudden I was like, wow, this is kind of nice, because a lot of React apps, you have a bucket of components, you have a bucket of screens or pages, and then you have a huge bucket of store. And it's all like mixed together, thrown in one thing.
It's a hodgepodge, as we call it. And it's really hard to test. A matter of fact, most developers then skip the testing because it's so hard.
Yeah.
And they don't even think in terms of layers, right? As soon as you can get a developer to start thinking in terms of layers of UI and non-UI and then the bridge in between, all of a sudden, and then you say it gives you flexibility. It really does.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. And I think it just really helped me having this idea and formalize it in libraries with NX really helps driving it home, because you can quickly inspect and you can quickly see if you're doing the right things from looking at the depth graph maybe. And one of the things I had to really accept, I just don't agree that everything's a component. And this is where then I want to have something like a service that I can just pull in, use, and not put it somewhere in the tree, because putting it in the tree in a hierarchy with like providers, if you use providers out of the box, you end up with a huge tree of layers. And yeah.
So here's another thought. I was actually talking to Jesse Sanders over at Brebug the other day, and Jesse and I talk maybe once a month. He's great. We were talking about this issue of layers and how it relates to Angular development and React development. And a classic scenario is you'll have a company wanting, they're either using AngularJS or an older version of Angular, and they're thinking, okay, we need to upgrade either the latest version of Angular. And for a lot of companies now, their teams are pushing, saying, well, we really want to use React.
Yeah.
And then they start asking the question, do we have to rewrite all of our code? Like, do we have to throw everything away? Do we just continue along because it's easier to do the upgrade? And then what about the path to React? And my answer, a suggestion that I had for Jesse, was you can do both. With this layered approach, if we think of UI as a replaceable component, right? If we write all of our non-UI components, whether we're in NX or not, let's say we're doing this in TypeScript, because like you and I love TypeScript. Yeah. It has its pain points, but I love it. So if we're writing non-UI components, and maybe we're using them in multiple libraries or whatever, we're testing those non-UI components. Those could be data services, managers and facades and all sorts of things, right? Data models, you name it. GraphQL layers, it could be a whole bunch of things. WebSocket layers, all this. If we're writing that in TypeScript, then it doesn't matter whether we have a UI with a React or one with Angular. Right. We can actually continue to evolve our non-UI components in non-UI libraries, add the features in we want, decide on the API, the public parts that we want to expose out, and then we could use it in an Angular upgrade path, an Angular path, or a React path. And they could do it in both. And that actually is a fantastic solution. And it promotes this idea that if you're doing a layered approach, then you can decide what UI to put on top.
Yeah, awesome. I love it.
You know, I love it.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, the layered approach. And I think something that we need to keep in mind as developers, whatever we're working on is like 1,000 layers already. So it's going to be translation to translation to translation, from like your machine to whatever we're doing right now. There's thousands of layers, or maybe hundreds of layers, depending on how you count. So it only makes sense to have some kind of convention and do things along these lines, because it's not all the same stuff you're building.
Now, I will say, and many React developers will probably, pardon the pun, react to this comment. If you're using useState and what are some of the and useEffect, but let's say useState is probably the most common. If you're using that within your view component, if you're just using one useState call, it's probably reasonable. It's probably okay. Yep. If you have your business logic and lots of useState calls configured in your view component, you're doing it wrong. I'm going to look right at the webcam. You're doing it wrong. If your view component is 1,000 lines of code, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, let me get this effect a bit more. You can do it right here, getting the full screen.
If you have a 1,000-line component in Angular or in React, you're doing it wrong. Yeah, now, it doesn't mean that you won't have 1,000 lines of code,
Yeah.
What it means though is that we want the UI code to be super clean.
Yeah.
And in general, I've reduced 1,000 lines of code of a view component to 30 to 50 lines of view component code. Now, someone might say, well, that doesn't mean you got rid of all the code. No, it didn't. I put it in different layers.
Yeah.
I took it outside of the UI layer and I put it in a completely thrash tested area that I can just test the crap out of it, right?
Yeah.
And really try to break it. And then when I integrate it into my UI component, I feel super confident that it's going to work in all scenarios.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I totally agree with that sentiment. Like refactoring code is not always reducing lines. You might add more lines. For instance, NX is a code-heavy solution, if you will. It's not low code, because if you create a library, there's like, I don't know, 10 new files at least to make the library exist. But this might help tremendously in your mental overhead and in understanding what the stuff does. And as you already said, testing it out in isolation without having to mock the whole world. To just test this component. And yeah.
And the cool thing about NX libraries that I think most people don't really acknowledge enough is that NX libraries, this is within a mono repository. The reason to use the libraries is you can set it up so, and when you're using a library, it's just as if you're importing code from that library as if it came from an NPM package, right?
Yeah.
So let's say you're going to see, when we look at some code in just a minute, you're importing from @mindspace-io.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen is I'm going to have a whole bunch of code in my library, but what you're importing is only what I have made public. And you can't import anything past the public barrier. Like I've prevented you from getting access to the underneath. So what happens is it lets me then decide what you can use, and it hides how I've implemented it. Yeah. So if I change underneath the hood, but I don't change the public API, that layer here, then it doesn't affect you at all. Yeah. And so that's the beauty of libraries.
Now, something worth noting, I think I'm right. You're a big proponent of using facades with NGRX, right?
So I'm a big proponent of facades. I'll say probably my pronunciation, not to correct you, not at all. I'm just used to it. Okay. Yeah. By the way, just as a bit of trivia, what is the right way to say it? Is it facades? Have I been saying it wrong all along?
You're a native speaker. I'm not.
Well, for everyone in Europe, how do they say it? Do they say facades?
In Dutch, we would say facade.
Okay, so I say facade. Okay.
Facade, yeah. Okay.
Facade,
I'm just Americanizing something that I shouldn't. So facades, let's keep it that way.
Let's go with that. Okay, yeah. But I feel better. That's cool. That's cool. Yeah. So I love facades. I love facades because by their very definition, they hide complexity.
Yeah.
They only expose, even through their own API, the properties and the methods that the facade feels the external world needs to use. Right? Now, the problem with facades is that once you show developers how to use a facade, then they think of the facade as a hammer. Then they start going, oh, everything is a nail, and they start making everything into facades, and that is not also the solution, right? There's no 100% recipe. Yeah. So you're going to see you and I are going to explore some solutions in a few minutes that will talk about state management, and we'll talk a little bit about facades. I love facades. Because they let me do very complex things on the inside, but it looks super easy on the outside.
Yeah, I really like them from an architectural point of view. When I see it and when I work with NGRX with the facade, I think this is what I think is the right way to do. And there's as many developers as opinions, so that's just an opinion. And then NGRX also is already a code-heavy approach, and then it's like, yeah, but you need to write like another, I don't know, 25-line file and maintain it. So it's kind of a trade-off. And sometimes you just want to get stuff out, and sometimes you want to just get stuff out in a neat way. And I think having a big team, having stuff that's used outside, kind of pushes you into thinking better about what is the layer I'm going to expose. Whereas if I just want to get something done, I might just just use it, whatever, over the place, reuse a bit of things that I shouldn't.
Yeah, it's funny. I love NGRX. The thing I love most about NGRX are the effects.
Right.
But I'm not a fan of actions, right? I'm not a fan of the Redux pattern, so to speak. It can keep things really clean. However, it can feel verbose. So for
Right.
me, I like facades because I get this power of a class that has a specific set of properties and a specific set of methods. And with dependency injection, if one facade needs to use another one, I can inject a facade instance into the other one, and then they can communicate to each other, right? Or I've had one case where I had one facade here. Think of it this one. I had a facade for an order dashboard, and I had a facade for an order. So this managed a list of orders. I'll do it like this, a list of orders, and this managed one order.
Yeah.
So the details, the order items, right?
Yeah.
Whenever the order items changed in this facade, this guy needed to update dynamically at runtime. Instead of reproducing the code, what I did was I just connected these two facades through an event bus, through a messaging thing. So they actually didn't inject into each other. They just injected an event bus into both. And then when this one changed, it just dispatched out basically a global message saying, I've changed. And this one is saying, hey, if that guy changes, let me know. And then he just requeries. So it works out perfect.
But the list doesn't care why or when or why or who changed it. It just reacts to a change. Yeah.
Well, in fact, and the one that's the whole list, the UI is the one that reacts to the change, right? And so the facade itself under the hood is actually also listening for a change in the single order. So when that order changes, this facade then triggers some other activity into the hood, which then updates the list. And so you can see how we sort of build up like it's composing, right? And I love facades. What we're going to talk about today with create store in the Mindspace utils doesn't actually create a formal facade class, but it shows how one can create and React a facade-like feature super easy.
Very cool. Let's move on to the screen because I think we can. And let me see here if I'm doing the right thing. I might have to switch browsers because sometimes my browser doesn't really update very well. So let's see how this goes. I'm going to change a few things. No, this is not updating well. I'm going to quickly start a new browser and hop on. And then in the meanwhile, because we're a live stream, we're 100% live here. Then one thing we always do is greet our people that are visiting here. For instance, Ciao. Hello, Ciao. Good to have you here. Ciao is a resident on the stream. Abel de la Fuente, always the first here. And actually, the team is complete, he says, because Serkan here is as well. And last but not least, my lovely wife. So yeah, all usual suspects. Thanks everybody for the support. I really, really appreciate it. Now,
your wife is also a developer?
Yes, my wife's developer in training, and
that's awesome.
She was an electromechanical engineer when I got to know her, and she loved designing stuff in CAD programs. So designing stuff, and you need to be on the computer for hours and be very patient. And I suggested her to be a developer. So there we are. I'm gonna quickly check.
The reason I ask, B-Man, is that I think that I love seeing more and more diversity in the development field, right? As with developers, regardless of the gender, it's really a mindset. Like if you can sit, as you said, sit in front of a computer for a long time and you enjoy the challenge of deep thinking and creating, then writing software solutions is fantastic.
I think so too. And so we kind of got into this. I think we're still online, right? Yeah, all is still good. I in the meanwhile switched browsers so I can share. But yeah, having a more diverse world in technology would be great. And this is either gender, also countries where you're from, because it's very common for a US-based person to be a developer or a Dutch person, but less so in Colombia. So we also really try to raise the bar here and make this interesting. But yeah, it's pretty cool. And also we wanted to travel. Like this was pre-pandemic, and the goal was to travel a lot. And I was like, well, I can help you land a job as a developer. I cannot help you land a job as a designer of tools. This is not my area. So it was kind of like, yeah, we got in there. She really likes it. She like a real developer, she bangs her head to the wall every now and then. So that's all going very well as expected there.
Well, when people tell me they want to be, I know we're getting off track, but it's for the audience. I'm taking the moment to say this.
For sure.
When people tell me they want to be a developer, my first response to them is, can you sit for 8 hours a shot in front of a computer?
Yeah.
Are you willing to bang your head on a problem for hours and hours and not give up? And if the answer is yes, then regardless of where you start, if you keep that mindset and that passion for just doing that and wanting to improve, you'll be a great developer.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we're getting there. She's having a hard time with me being her teacher because I'm throwing her more or less in the deep, and I just let her work on stuff. And if you block, just go ahead and ask me to unblock you. But I'm not the kind of person that goes there and sit on the theory first. I'm not a theoretic person myself. I'm very much a practical developer. So I learned it by doing. I learned by tweaking code, and sure, I got my fair share of theory within the years, but for me, it's never been the goal, and I really like the ability to create something without really knowing in the details how the machine works. You can still handle it, use it, and if you mess up, you revert whatever you did, and you start over again. And this is what I think is elegant. If you compare it to something like woodwork, if you chop off a piece that you didn't want to have to chop off, you're really going to start over. And I think that the soft part of the software is what kind of brings us that.
Well, software, you mentioned something that's really true, which is about that mentoring and the learning aspect. And it's related even to woodwork. If you're beginning in woodwork or writing software and someone who's an expert tries to tell you the best way to do it, you're not going to really appreciate why. Right. You have to at least run into a problem once. Because really what we learn after a while is applying these patterns that we know that work and avoiding the patterns that we know that don't work. But if you try to give all the correct ones in the beginning to beginners, you're undermining their foundation.
Yeah, that's a very, very true point. I actually remember one of the first times I really started coding. So I did a bit of coding when I was a kid, and like Pascal and that kind of stuff, like early 90s. Mm-hmm. And then I started again being interested early 2000, and then Flash was the hot thing. Macromedia.
Flash and Flex.
Flash, Flex was a bit down the line. Now I was fascinated by Flash because, well, Flash, and you had tween animations between a square and a circle and that kind of thing. It was really, really fascinating for me. And I had a coworker who was really good at it, and I admired this man hugely. But what I didn't like, each time I had an issue, he would send me to the documentation. And documentation is boring because you have to read, and English was not even my first language. And I was not at all very interested in learning it. I was just like, this is the boring part. Why can't you just tell me? And he told me very similar like you. Yeah, you have to make the same mistakes that I do. And you'll make less because I'll point you to the right direction. So it'll take you a bit less time. But you have to do this yourself.
Right. If he said it took me 10 hours to discover that solution, he's not expecting the other person to invest 10 hours of pain. However, you do need 30 minutes right? And there is this acronym we use have you ever heard of this one called RTFM?
Yes. We can say anything on this channel. So
well, read the manual, read the FN manual, right? Yeah. Which really means don't harass me with questions that you're not even giving some thought to.
Yeah.
Right. Ask me questions that you've deliberated upon and you've thought about, and then you're really stuck, and then you really do need some guidance, right? Those are good ones.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. We have the Angular Discord, but we can probably talk about ours. And I'm not on any strict planning, so that's good as well. We have the Angular Discord, and each day there's people that come there with an issue, and the response is, please first tell us what you want to achieve, because the thing you try to fix is most likely not your actual issue. You're most likely way beyond fixing your issue. You got into some hole where it's hard to get out. And another thing is, start building a prototype first. Go to StackBlitz, start recreating your problem so that you really understand it. And a lot of times, unsurprisingly, people are like, I figured it out. Because if you look at it from a fresh point of view, you really start into dive like, hey, what am I going to try and achieve here? And this actually already gives you the answer. Or at least if it doesn't, it gives you a better question, because you
That's
can
right.
then ask like, hey, I tried this one, but this doesn't work. And now it stopped understanding.
Mm-hmm.
I think Christopher here had the great way to explain this. Read the fine menu.
That's a much better way to say it, even though I like the crude version, but I like that one too.
Yeah, this is beautiful. Thanks for the input, Christopher, and good to see you here as well. So we got an editor here, and we got a wallet, and I'm actually gonna quickly peek if this thing renders, because this is kind of the preface of it all, I think, because if we don't have a rendering app, then it will be kind of a lost cause, but here we go. So I'm working on this wallet. It's a very uneventful app. It's really, really almost boring. It's a real single page app. So we're going to have only one route. We right now have a different route here, but this will be gone. This will be a drop down. But when the goal of the app, I'm modeling this after an existing app. And this is one of the things I often like to do. Just take a good example, take whatever works and model it after it. So this is kind of the idea I had in mind. Now this app is open source, it's actually built in React, and I thought about forking it, but when I saw the source code, I was like, no, I'm going to do this myself, because I got ideas on how to do it. And it was at this moment, about a week ago, when you tweeted, React Akita is here. And this was when I was like, I need to work with this stuff and not try to hack my way into my state into this. So I think if we look at this app, it's a single page app, as said. Here in the middle, this is the active account you have, and you can actually switch accounts. So you can switch wallets. And so in that sense, you can say this is basically your wallet list view here, where you create new wallets and you have all the wallets that you have are listed. And then the thing we have in the screen is actually our wallet detail. And then another thing that's kind of interesting is that this is the network you're connected to. So it's basically the API. You can see it's the API that this wallet talks to, and we want to be able to change this thing. And as you can see, if I change this, the whole content changes, because we basically connect to a different payment API, and my wallet might have funds on one API on one blockchain where it doesn't have funds on the other blockchain.
Okay.
So this is kind of what we are. And then if I think about this in terms of providers, in terms of state, I think the network is going to be the outer layer of state, because I always want basically my whole app to reconsider itself once I try to change from one network to the other. So if I think about,
can I ask you your question as you're going through
Sure.
this?
Sure.
So I'm understanding this part really well. However, it seems like one consideration is that you won't know what's in each of these network sets of wallets until you switch to the network.
Correct.
Is there a need in the future for you to be able to see all wallets for all networks?
I don't really think so.
Okay.
So the reason we have access to the test network is for developers like myself that work on the blockchain and that want to build a blockchain app. But I imagine like 99% of the people that want to use a wallet like this actually want to access their funds or make a transaction.
Okay.
And so from that point of view, I think we can safely say you're always only connected to only one network at a time.
Fair enough.
And this is kind of the same, and I don't think I have this here. I'm not gonna, I don't have this open right now. But if you open another wallet, this is another app, and here you also just checking which network is a global thing. And then as of that, you're gonna interact. And one of the reasons is I want to be able to test with $100,000 worth of crypto in my wallet, see how it behaves, see how the numbers render, all that stuff, without actually having to send $100,000 US dollar to my crypto account. So these test networks are kind of nice because they have this faucet, if I say this correct, I think that's the correct word, where you can basically request funds and they'll fund it to your wallet.
Got it. Okay.
And then I think the other kind of interesting thing is, DevNet is really slow right now. Let's get to testnet. So what I can do here is request an airdrop, and then you'll see this thing updates. So this is an asynchronous call. It reaches out to the backend, say, hey, give this wallet an airdrop, drop one currency in it, Sol at this in this case, and then at some point it will refresh. So we have some kind of nice things, and then another thing. If you talk about having state in your UI components, I always think about open and close toggle, open show details or hide details. This is what I would typically have in local UI component state. This is probably not something I'd store globally, but yeah, this is basically what we're modeling. And then there's something that not anything special, like there's a few modal windows here. This is all pretty straightforward. So yeah,
one of the hardest things with writing applications that you're working with, you're planning to have state management. The hardest thing is just planning where your data is going to be stored and how it's going to be shared, right? And what data is, what information is part of your state management approach and what is not. Right. That's the thing that confuses so many people.
Yeah, I think that's kind of an interesting question. So if we look at this app, the test networks in the app that I'm building, we only have 2 networks right now. At this very moment, there's no way to run this instance, this blockchain locally. So here you see a local host reference. If you run this blockchain locally, let's say in a Docker container, but we're not even going to do this. So this is pretty much a fixed set. There's just 2 networks identified by URL. So I really think I'm just going to store like 2 strings in here, maybe add a label to them so you can see. Now the accounts, on the other hand, this is something that you keep on adding. So you can import one and you can create a new one. And so this is definitely something that is going to be stored. In this case, because it's a crypto wallet, it's going to be stored in your browser. So IndexedDB or local storage. The whole idea behind having a wallet like this is that the user has their own keys and that there's not a service where your keys lives. Because in crypto, a key is like your password, and if you have the key, you have the access to your money, basically. So yeah, cool. And so this works. This is nice. I'm gonna quickly open the DevTools to see if there's not any errors right here, but it all looks good. And then from the implementation, so I didn't split this out in libraries yet. I first want to make it work, and the splitting it out in library part is kind of the easy part for me down the line, because I kind of know how to do it. So I figured in order to make this easy and approachable, I'm going to start with just one app and put it all in the same app, so we don't have to worry about switching libraries, etc. And then some other library and some other live stream I might do splitting it up. And here I actually already started. So I think what I'm going to do is quickly switch branch. I'm going to commit it all and just say work in progress branch, and then switch back to where I was like before I talked to you about this, which is this. So this is basically the whole basic app, and I only have some UI stuff where I do the UI container, the UI header, and the container. And then inside the app shell, here is where I do some ugly things, because this is also kind of, React doesn't really promote good habits. So if you're lazy like me, like I was at this point, you're just gonna inline in your router, gonna write your component.
Okay.
But yeah, this is basically the wallet. The wallet list here, this is the thing we actually look at. And then for development purposes, I have a few wallets here. It's not even in state because I just wanted to render this out. And then the wallet list item, this is each of the individual item. And here I have to show details and hide details. This, I don't know why I put it in state. This is just a fixed string, so it should be there. But this is basically where we look at. And I think what might be a good one is to try and figure out how we're going to store these ones, unless you have another idea where we want to dive in.
Let's go back to your source just for a moment, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So the first thing I think of when I see this is this is a little bit of a version of where there's essentially you're managing state within the view component.
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
And so one of the first steps we can do and we won't do it immediately, I'm just talking about it, and then we can decide what we want to do,
Mm-hmm.
is we could move a lot of this code to a custom hook. Lines 43 through 44, we could, and all lines 38 on up, we could move to a custom hook.
Okay.
Because then when we do that, then we just call our custom hook. And what is this guy using? So this isn't depending yet on anything coming from a provider, from the context, right?
Yeah.
So later, we might want to say, if we're making a network call, we might need to know which network we want to call.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, we could put that current network in a provider in the context and look it up within our custom hook by saying use context. And then we know which network to use, and then we have our state there, and then we can start enhancing it. So that's, and notice I'm not even talking about developing reactive state. I'm just talking about just managing state.
Yeah, totally. So,
but if we did, oh, sorry, B-Man. I was just going to say, if we did that, then the advantage of that is then we're building a UI component that maintains that one-way data flow. And what I mean by a one-way data flow is that data from the hook comes into the view component to be rendered, and user interactions like toggle details on line 44 would go back to the hook to do something else.
Right.
Right. So if we think our custom hook is a black box, then that's where our views start shining.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I'm just going to check if I have anything fancy in here. So if I look at this, I think even these ones can be passed in as a prop, right? Token name and symbol.
So more than likely, you'd right. So what we could do here, well, first off, let's just do this if you want. You're already in, you have your wallet list.tsx, right?
Yeah.
So you could create a wallet.hook.ts.
Not even TSX.
Not even TSX, just I always get confused about this one until I run into a compile problem. I believe it's just a TS.
Let's go. Let's see.
We can easily change it later, all right?
Yeah.
And then what I do is just literally copy all your use state code from your component. Just grab, copy all four of them. Yep. Paste it in. And of course, we're going to wrap that in a function that we'll call, and when we create a custom hook, we always, we're going to export that the hook name with a use prefix. Always has to have a use prefix.
Yeah.
I like doing them as constants.
Yeah, so that would be something like
use wallet. Yep. Yeah. And then you can do it like that to start. Now, the cool thing is, let's give it a type. So it is a use wallet colon, and this is a React. Actually, I was thinking of functional components. This one, never mind. I apologize. Here, we're not necessarily going to pass anything in yet as arguments, so we won't worry about that. And but we do now. You can move lines 3 through 6 down. Yep, cool. Do you have currently? You don't have anything that needs to use a side effect or any sort of asynchronous activity yet, so we don't have to worry about use effect. Now, what we want to do is we probably want to publish. What information do you want to publish from the use wallet when it's called?
Is these two actually, token name and token symbol. These are things that can go out, probably to show details in order for it to show the lower panel or not.
And then probably the toggle details, right?
And then a method, yep.
So now the question becomes, so you could do this as an object. You can return an object with these properties, or you could return what's called a tuple, which is essentially an array that has a specific number of elements. Right. The reason I love tuples is because whoever receives the tuple can destructure it with whatever variable names they want, and we'll show that in just a minute. So I would recommend you return a tuple.
Very cool. Yeah, this is also something I really learned to love and use in my Angular code now that I know this was possible. Because I used to be like, other parameter, get a thing of parameters, but often it makes way more sense to just have one parameter, which is an array of positions, and do
That's
it like
right.
that.
You know, the funny thing is, for the longest time, I saw tuples being talked about in like software engineering magazines and articles, and no one could explain to me what a tuple is very well at all. And finally, you know where I discovered what a tuple was? When I started learning about React hooks.
Right. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, the light bulb went on.
Yeah. For those that are not aware, this is a tuple, basically what we're doing here.
UseState returns a tuple, right?
Yeah.
And it returns a tuple, which is an array. A tuple is an array. So UseState returns an array with only 2 elements. It will never have more than 2 elements. And the first element is always the value. And the second element is always a setter function.
Yeah.
But notice here, bman named it whatever variables he wanted. So he said, okay, now what I would also do, bman, is I would actually give it, UseState is a generic. So I would give it a type.
Right. Yep, that's a great one.
Definitely. Right, because then it documents your code.
Yeah, and if I would do set show details equals a string of 1, it will say, hey, this is not cool, because I expect to get a Boolean back.
That's right. Okay, so cool. We were going to publish this out.
Now then, so one other thing, I think having the word kin here as a token symbol and a token name it's kind of not really relevant, because this app is going to be used for kin only. But I think it's kind of nice to have this thing in state, because at some point we might want to support wallets that are with a different symbol or a different name. So this is kind of preparing the future. I will most likely make this wallet multi-currency, if you will. But that's right now why there's not a... But then also, I'm not really sure if this is going to be used as state. But let's for now...
Let's do this, though. Since you said that, let's pass in, and we're going to pass in an object. And into here, and it's an object that takes, for now, 2 strings.
Yeah, and then token name and token symbol.
Yep. And so...
like this.
Actually, you don't give it you bring the keys into the first the structure, and the second one is just the types. So here you'd say token name, comma, and token symbol. And then on the other structure on the right there, get rid of token name and the colon, and get rid of that one there.
Okay. Now
what you can do is, so are you going to potentially have different token name that's different from the symbol?
Yeah.
You are. Okay, so what I would do is I
think one is to just make the point, this kin is called kin and the token is the same, but it's going to be Bitcoin versus BTC. So the ticker symbol is BTC and the name is Bitcoin. Just like Tesla is the name of the stock, and then the symbol is TSLA, right? So this is kind of the idea.
Well, let's do this. Let's make it even simpler, because I was making it too complicated. Actually, would you mind leaving it as Bitcoin and the for the audience and the other one? Because there we go. So let's make this, instead of an object, make it just 2 arguments. Token name, string, and token symbol.
Right away here in the...
Yep. So just say token name. Now we're going to use the power of TypeScript to actually say we're not even going to have to specify the type, because we're going to assign default values. So we're going to say token name is Bitcoin is equal to the string Bitcoin. So get rid of colon. Yep, but since you're giving it a string, a default, you can just, now there you go, exactly. You don't actually have to put in the string. There we go. And then here would be, good.
IntelliJ kindly already suggests here, this is
perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. And then here you would just use now, if you only want these, later we're going to use these for some reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would say you don't need 8 and 9 anymore because you already have them as state. And later, when the arguments values change, we'll fix that.
Yeah. So it's not state here. It will not change inside this thing. It will only ever receive from management, basically from the upper layer. It will receive whatever it should render out.
Correct. Which means then you probably don't even need to output it back in line 13. You probably you could output the show details and the toggle details.
Even better. And then, okay, yeah, it doesn't need to be in the wallet, in the use wallet hook. We just need to have it at some other place.
For now. Later, if here our wallet needs to do something asynchronous with these tokens, and then modify other state, we'll add that in here.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is kind of the idea is when you connect to multiple backends, you need to know which route to take regarding on which network you're connecting to.
Right. Now, there's a bug on line 10 that I'll describe in just a minute, and it's a bug that gets every single React developer, but let's come back to that. So we probably just want to return the current value, show details.
Yeah.
And then the function to toggle the details. Right.
Reference.
So here we're just returning a tuple. And then what I like to do is I define a type up at top above on line 4, and I call it wallet results as an example.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll give it a type. So the type would be it's a tuple exactly, and it's a Boolean comma, and then a function that returns a void. Or for the strict developers, TypeScript developers, they might say never, but let's just leave it at void for now.
Never? Do we have never?
There is a never.
I'm so unaware of a lot of things. That's cool. Okay, cool. Let's go with never.
So then, now then you would say, yep, wallet results.
Yeah, this will return wallet results. And now
the beauty of giving it the type then, now what is it saying here? See, look at that. So in this case, I know why. So I'd like to say I did this deliberately, but I forgot again. So the reason you're getting this error, by the way, is never means it will never return. It always will stay processing.
Yeah.
In our case, as soon as we call set show details, it's done, it returns. So we have to say a function that returns void.
Yeah.
If we had a while true or a while forever true, then that would be a never.
Very cool.
Okay, now on line 10.
Yeah.
Line 10 is a bug.
Very cool.
And this one drove me insane when I first came to React. And so here's the problem. You'll think that this works because you're saying, hey, I want to toggle the details, and the current, let's say show details is true.
Mm-hmm.
And later you come in and you say set show details, and you want to use the current value. But what React is doing is there's no guarantee that the show details on line 9 is the same value as the current value that's being output on line 7.
Right. And I actually think I ran into this several times already, and I always hacked my way around it. But
so it's a really easy way.
Yeah.
Go ahead. The super easy way to fix this is that set show details is a setter function that is managing some state, and the state it's managing in this case is just a Boolean. Yep. So you can pass in a modification function into set show details. So you'll say S for state, and now you have the current value. You could have said V for value, whatever, right? So you put whatever variable name you want, and now you could say is equal to not S. And this way you're guaranteed that you're toggling the current value of show.
Yeah. This bit me in the back several times, and I never knew it except to the method as well. But what I did was, let's say I set a new value. Let's say I use setState to store a list of wallets, and then I set wallets and I store this thing. Right afterwards, wallets is not updated. It's not directly being updated. And I was like, but I kind of instructed you before. This is nothing asynchronous. This is just changing a thing in memory. Here, there you go. Lars says golden nugget here. Yep, perfect.
So that line 11 is, you should always remember that if you're modifying state, always use this modify. I don't know the formal name of it. This predicate function that passes in the current state and gives you a chance. Like, here's another good example of why you'd want to do it. Let's say you wanted to say increment or add to the current state. Let's say you had a counter.
Yeah.
Well, you can't add 2 to something unless you know what the current counter value is. So you have to say, so you have to know what the current plus 2, right? And the only way to be assured that you're getting the correct value is using this predicate function. Now, this also goes into play when we're using immer to make immutable data. And we haven't talked about that yet. And right now, you're not using immutable data. You're just managing data that no one can modify show details, because you're exporting an atomic value, right? But if you published an object, someone could modify the internals of that, and you'd be hosed. Like, you'd be going crazy as to why it's not working. So when we start talking about really managing more complex state, we always want to make it immutable and lock it down so the outside world only can use it as read-only.
Yeah.
Right? Then there's only one way then they can change state, and that is to use your toggle details as an example.
Yeah.
So we'll come back to that later, but I wanted you to be aware of it, that this works now, but immer uses this idea of this predicate function where it passes in a draft, and you can then modify the data directly, and immer takes care of all the complex details of changing the explicit references.
Very cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Chow
now
here says it's been an hour and no Akita yet, but also why is this not working? No, I don't want to block Chow. It's the last thing I want to do. Anyway, doesn't love it. But Chow is also a huge fan of immer. So Chow, we already got you on that one at least. So cool.
He's impatient. Right, we have to set the stage for other people, Chow. Sorry.
Yeah.
And we will get to Akita.
I think this actually already resolved a few of the issues. At least maybe 1 or 2 set timeouts that I have somewhere hidden out of sight in order to make stuff work. And
right. So if you find yourself using hooks or updating state and you're having to use a set timeout, then something else is wrong, right?
Yeah. My knowledge is definitely lacking at that point, and I'm trying to get something delivered, and then
See, the thing though, B-Man, is if you hadn't run into those problems and then I showed you this predicate function on line 8, you wouldn't have appreciated it, right?
Yeah, no, totally. And I think same can goes for Lars that says this is a golden nugget. It smells like he already ran into this as well. And yeah, definitely.
All right, so now let's go back to your list, because you're going to need to also one other thing. You want to grab all that data that's up above and get it out of there, bring it back into the hook.
So these ones.
Just grab the whole wallets,
Grab
the entire structure.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we're going to put it in the hook, and we'll paste it up above.
Outside of the hook?
Yeah, we can do that for now. Now this is private to the hook, right? But what we can do is in use wallet, we can export that structure if we want to as a list. We could just say wallets, right? And I would put it first. So I'd keep all the functions at the end and the data, there you go, like that. Now you should get an error in your wallet results, right?
Yeah, it's this is no longer compliant. And then maybe quickly go here and export this type into its own file, so that
actually bring that, you could even for now just bring it right into the hook for now, because we can change that. We can do it better later if we want.
Yeah,
there you
perfect.
go.
Love it.
And you want to export wallet results.
So this is now going to be a wallet array, a boolean, and a method that returns void, which is our toggle.
Correct. And of course, don't forget to export it, because then it's available within the view.
Perfect.
Okay, I think this is good. Now let's go down. Yep. Notice, by the way, we are not actually using state with wallets or anything. We're not trying to manage it within the hook itself because it's hard-coded. But later, here's the advantage. We have it here. We're publishing the list out. Later, if we wanted to load the wallets dynamically and use Axios or Fetch or whatever, We could totally do that and then put a use state and a use effect in here, and the outside world never knows about it.
Yeah, yeah. And this is kind of the facade, if you will, then facade function, where we basically take the responsibility of giving you a list, but we don't let you know or care how we implement it or where we fetch the data from.
Yes, so that actually leads to another thing. So while we called it wallet results, so what's the difference between a facade and a view model? And the answer is that a facade manages some properties and some methods and handles maybe services internally and lots of complexity. But what the facade publishes to the outside world may be some properties and some specific methods, right? The facade has the choice of publishing specific view models, which is the thing that I'm giving you has this structure and that's all you get. So a facade could be different from a view model. So what results here is wallet results is actually a view model. It is a structure. In this case, it's an array that has a list, a Boolean, and a function. And that's the view model. So we could change wallet results to just be wallet view model. And then later we'll come back and we'll talk about how we would create a facade.
Like this?
Yeah, exactly.
Or even
if you want to be more verbose, you could, like, if someone else didn't know what VM stood for, then this is better, right? And this way, you're being explicit in your intention of what the hook is returning. The hook is returning a view model. Right, which for those developers who are familiar with view models will go, oh, there might be more going on inside the hook, but this is what I'm getting. Now, when we go back to the list.
And it's kind of a need-to-know basis, right? This is all I need to know to render out my UI. And everything else might be built by my coworker.
That's exactly right. So now what you're going to do is you're going to import from wallet hook, and you could do it this way. You could say const,
const, and then we take a variable equals use wallet. So import this one here, and then this will take wallets.
Right, now this one you could give it any name you want, right, to these things, right?
Yeah.
So you could call it, well, it makes sense to call it wallets, but the nice thing about a tuple is you can give it any name.
If we want to call it accounts, because in the UI, you often don't talk about a wallet, you talk about an account, because
there you go.
It's kind of conceptual thing, but this might, let's go with this for now, just to drive home the point.
The only thing by calling it account is, now you're going to laugh, I'm going to get like picky. If it's a list, I would give it a, account implies a single object, but you're doing a map over it.
Totally.
There you go. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like one thing that I'm kind of wondering about now, this use wallet, this is for the whole list, whereas inside here we're interested in the individual item and their visibility, like the show details and hide details.
Oh, so sorry. The stuff I was working on was for the wallet list item. So on line 6, move line 6 down. Let's come back to the wallet and just to the wallet list in just a minute. Because what we're doing is we're designing a view model for the details of a specific wallet, right?
Yeah. Should I call this wallet detail hook and the other wallet list hook down the line? Is this something you would?
Well, so the really cool thing is that the wallet, the use wallet, could. Let's come back to that. That's a discussion that we'll have to. It depends, right?
I love it. First, it depends today, but we've passed over a lot of them.
I try to avoid saying it depends, but it really does. It depends because I don't know enough yet about what you're intending. What's inside wallet? Can you show me again? Like, where do the kin symbols come from? The tokens. Okay, here, ID, name, seed. Got it. Okay.
This is
got it. Okay, so what our hook has done is it's exposing all the available wallets, but the toggle details is for a specific wallet, right?
Correct. Yeah, and this is where I basically messed it up because the file is called walletlist.tsx, whereas I'm actually having wallet list and wallet list item.
So now, if you do a wallet list item you can actually make the wallet list item not even use the hook. In fact, I wouldn't have it use the hook. I would have it literally be a presentation only component, and we'll come back to, we'll fix that. So let's move the use wallet. There we go, on line 6. So now we have just column, yep, there you go. And then show, didn't you have like a show or toggle details?
Yeah, so I had the show details is the Boolean that we expose, and then the toggle details is the method that we expose to do this.
Awesome. Okay. And right now we're not passing any arguments to use wallet, but we have some default tokens that we're using, which is cool.
Yeah.
The thing that we want here in the wallet list is, so one of the things I always do is I always, if I'm going to pass in props to a view component, I always define a type for the props. And here's why. You're going to be passing in a wallet, which is fine, but you also need to pass in an event handler.
Right. Which toggles this wallet.
Correct. So let's do this. Let's define a type here, right? Like on line 16, and this could be wallet list item props. Yep.
Okay. Few of the things that are agreed on in the React land is how these props are called. I think this is one of the pretty common things.
Yep.
Now I can take this one.
Take the whole, there you go, that whole thing. Now let's do it, add another property here, or go ahead. Yep, now let's add another property. And this property is a on toggle.
Cool, like it, which is a method that has a void.
Returns void, you got it, exactly, right? And now you're destructuring this, which is fine.
Yeah.
And just do an on toggle.
Toggle, and then change my instances of toggle details here, and there's one down below.
Now, is this toggling only this one or all of them? It's only this one.
Wallet. Yep.
Okay, so the thing here is the on toggle we were designing was going to call the toggle for the parent, right?
Yep.
In this case, what you want to do is you want to toggle for this child component. So we're sort of mixing intents here. The hook is actually, does it really need to know about the toggle details?
Yeah, so I think, and this is where, if I would design this from scratch, I would probably think like, let's have a hook for the wallet list and let's have one hook for the individual wallet.
The thing is sometimes it doesn't hurt to have it right here, right? So in other words, you can, let's enable line 27.
Yeah.
Okay. And let's disable 25 and 26.
Yep, let's get rid of these one. And these can actually, as I think about it right now, I'm totally fine with saying, just have 2 values here. Just say, hey, these are both kin. And for now, we're going to do kin. And then if I want to drive home the point, I can say Bitcoin BTC. But I'm totally fine with ignoring this for now and just leave these as a hard code value.
Right, and later we could use a provider in a context to look up the one you want, and it's not really part of the hook. It's part of the provider tree. We could do that.
You know where it's actually part of? It's part of the network that you select.
There you go. Which would be in the provider, right?
Yeah, outside, you're either going to connect to this one or you're going to connect to this one, but you're never going to send kin on a Bitcoin network or vice versa. That doesn't work.
Right, and in that case, the wallet is going to be using this network information to do a loading, right? And you may want to publish the name and the symbol that's associated with the wallets that are currently loaded.
Yeah.
So if I think about the use hook or the use wallet, I may want to publish the token name and symbol back out. Right. And this one, by the way, wallet list item props doesn't need on toggle now, because that's just going to be internal to this component.
Okay. Yeah,
so that's why I meant, by the way, this depends, because I wanted to make sure I understood what each component is doing.
Now let me quickly fix some intelligent person told me I should use functions here, so I'm going to use this quickly and do this. It's basically the opposite of what I have. So using the predicate here to set the state, so I'm not doing this.
Right,
issue.
and the way you can fix that too is put parentheses around the argument show.
Yeah, Prettier does that for me.
And if you say Boolean, then you automatically then know it's not show dot, but it's just, you know what I mean? So then it's very clear.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple things we need to do is we're going to go back to our hook. We're going to get rid of the toggle because we don't care about that, I believe, at the hook level.
Yep.
And we do want to publish the did we lose our arguments that we were going to pass in with the symbol name and everything?
Yeah, we had it here, but I got them out because they were unused. But I'm happy to get them back.
Go ahead and pass them back in and initialize them, and then we'll pass them out as part of the values coming out of the use wallet.
Cool. Yeah, I like that. Token name, token symbol is BTC, and then this will return token name, token symbol. And this,
now later, you could even put in let's delete line 36.
Let me update the. I'll do that. We can delete line 36. We can also delete this one.
Right. You could put a comment in here too, which is use context. Use then the angle the code ticks to say use context to look up. We're going to put it in the @ to do here. Use context to look up token name and symbol.
Yeah. Okay. So this is just a to do here that I'm gonna at some point use that.
Correct.
B-man, don't try to outsmart your mentor with cleaning unused code before you're done. You're totally right, Lars.
No, the mentor is sort of not being very clear here. All right.
I love how this goes, by the way. So and I already picked up quite a few things. So this is all going very well. So one of the things I like about doing this, and this kind of is another. Right here, it's called token name and token symbol, which is nice because we might have other things with the name. So having name as a generic one, in this case, might not make sense. But having this being part of a tuple allows me to use it however I like right here.
Correct. And in fact, let's do one step further. The more I think about it, if we go back here, you're going to love this one. Remove the arguments and put them as local variables.
Outside?
And the reason, inside. No, inside. There you go. And the reason we're going to do that is when we use context, we're going to look up these variable values automatically, right? So for now, we've hard-coded them, but we published them out. And we're not taking anything as an argument, which means now we are using the use wallet as we plan to in the future. Because remember, if we use the in your to-do comment, instead of saying use space context, put in use with a lowercase u and a capital C, all one word.
Inside here?
Inside the to-do comment.
Sorry, use context.
Correct, and then parentheses, open, close, right? At the end. So now we know that we're going to use this hook in the future to look up these values, and then this tells us too we don't need these coming in as properties in the function, because we're going to look them up on the fly, and then we're going to publish them out for whoever might want to use them in the view. Cool. So now back to the wallet list. So now you can.
I could say name or symbol.
Correct. And if you don't need them here, by the way, you don't have to have them here. You can actually call the same hook here. Now, if you wait, so that doesn't work, by the way. Guess why line 23 doesn't work? There you go. Exactly. So that, by the way, for everyone who's watching, is a trick. When you want to ignore a tuple element, you use underscore, and if you want to ignore another one, you would use underscore underscore. So
if we're only interested in the symbol. Underscore is just as any identifier, but it gets ignored by the linter if you don't use it. As how I see it.
Unless you, like some people have explicitly disallowed these type of symbol, variable names, which I think is not good. Yeah. Okay, so now you have use state and toggle details. And I would argue that this is the maximum of things that you would want in this guy. If right, so we'll come back to this in a minute, which is how can we do a better job of even this, right? Because one, we're using a custom hook above, and now we're using it here to look up the token names, and then we have separate use state, and so it feels like a mixture that isn't really clean yet. And yes, I know we know that we'll clean it up.
Yeah. I'm going to do one trick here, if you're all right with that. Going to export this to its own file, because I was just being lazy putting it down here. I think this should live in wallet list item. And then I'll just continue. I'll fix it.
That's a pretty cool feature.
Yeah. Gotta love WebStorm or IDE. Okay, cool. So, beautiful. This is like getting to a, and then think this is more or less my smart component at this point.
Yes, so I'm trying to think. So one of the things we could do too here also is now I'm thinking about how we might want to do these things, right? You're passing in the key and then the wallet, right? So you're passing in the specific wallet to the list item, which is cool. And you could pass in the symbol. So let's go to your list item. What are you using the symbols for?
Actually, to print them out. I can switch quickly to this example. I hope it still renders. Yeah, there you go. It says Bitcoin BTC here. So this is, and then if we have a multi-network wallet, this one can say Bitcoin and the other one can say Ethereum and then KIN. So this can be different on basically a per wallet basis.
Okay, so in that case, I might actually pass in the token name and the symbol from the parent.
Yeah.
Notice how we grabbed it right here. So go back to your code if you would. Notice on line 10, this is in the list item. We're passing in the wallet, but then we're calling the hook again. And that just seems like wrong, right? Yeah. So I would pass in the token name and the symbol exactly.
Yeah.
I like your style. You modify the props first.
I hope, I love doing error-driven development, but if I can then type error-driven development, but if I can get around it by doing the typing first, then that's always preferable. Now here's the thing I adore from React that sadly Angular doesn't have. A lot of questions. If you have a prop that's not optional, it will nag. And Angular doesn't do this up until today. Angular 12 still doesn't do this. So pay attention, folks. It's these kind of things that make it definitely interesting to work with other tech than your normal stuff.
Now, B-Man, before you add in this other one, take out a token symbol. No, you can add back the token name. Mm-hmm. I'll go ahead and pass the value in. Oh, by the way, so what we want on line 6 is to grab those from the hook.
Yeah, token name, token symbol.
Now, the nice thing about this approach here's why we like this. The use wallet doesn't tell us on the outside where the name and the symbol come from. We don't care. We just want to render it, right?
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of custom hooks, is that it hides this complexity. So in a way, the hook is a little bit like a facade that will also trigger UI re-renders.
Yeah.
So now let's pass in the token name here on line 11. But notice we're still getting nagged, right? So now just for grins, go to the list item and make symbol optional.
Yeah.
Now go back to the list and it will no longer nag you. So by having clearly defined your props in TypeScript, you have guarded yourself against these problems, right? And you give yourself this flexibility. So I would go back and remove the optional indicator because you definitely want it.
Then another nice little nugget of WebStorm is you can say, hey, insert it for me because this is probably what you want.
Now, I do not have that in, I don't think Visual Studio offers that. That's pretty sweet.
I think Visual Studio Code will probably add it in about 3 or 4 years for you. So that's all. You'll all get it.
And you just did something else.
It's free though.
You just did something else I really like. I love them on multiple lines. It's your prettier change. I love that. Now, something else that most Angular developers aren't aware of. Like, why it took me forever to figure this one out. Like, notice wallet list item doesn't have a separate ending bracket.
Yes.
It has a backslash on it.
Yeah, it's self-closing by default, or by it allows self-closing.
Correct, and it's because it's an actual React element. It gets transcompiled to a React element, and so it recognizes this as essentially a React view component, and it's part of JSX. But it made me crazy trying to figure out why it wasn't working. This wouldn't work in regular HTML.
Yeah, and what they told me, wise people from the Angular team, I can't recall who, but it's like, yeah, it's not valid HTML, and Angular uses valid HTML for its templates. In HTML, there's only a few elements that allow self-closing, like I think image and BR and probably link and a few like really ancient things. But if you do, even in React, if you do div / this works and it's valid. And it, I mean, you probably want a separator if you do this, separate a block. But yeah, this is kind of cool. And then again here, using the context menu, it says, hey, I can collapse this for you. So then it will collapse and then you hit save and it's all pretty again.
That's pretty sweet. And I love it. The thing that also many Angular developers need to remember is that while we're defining this template here, this is still virtual DOM. And so unlike Angular, this DOM, when there's changes, the virtual DOM only compares the pieces that are different and only updates in the real DOM the differences. So it doesn't actually recreate the whole DOM. And this short syntax, I don't care if it's not a valid HTML component. It's certainly nice.
Sure, no, totally. I'm totally with you on that. I think it's a very academic reason to say we're not supporting this. Right. I would love it if it was there. And yeah, and even more so, if you build a structure, a tree, totally fine, because self-closing doesn't really have any benefits. But if you work with these kind of things and you have a lot of UI components that just take in some props, you'll end with a lot of elements that are closing themselves right away. Mm-hmm. And in Angular, you need to have a dash in order to be, like, officially you need to have a dash in order to be valid. So it's always going to be a long-ish name. It's never going to be like wallet or something. You're always going to have a selector with a dash in it, as long as you want to be compliant. Yeah, cool. So this, by the way, is also a shortcut for anything in here. But I might do another session on why I think everybody should use IDE IntelliJ editors, but that's a whole different.
Okay,
cool.
So we did our first refactoring with this hook, our custom hook, right? Yeah. Now, is it? Am I pronouncing his name right? Chow?
Chow? Yes. Chow.
Yep. Chow was saying, "Where's React Akita?" Right?
Yeah.
And maybe we'll get there soon. The reason I'm not diving into it right away is it's important to build up to this idea that React already has some form of state management.
Yeah, and this is what Lars always correctly suggests when somebody says, "Hey, but I think what's the common thing again? Yeah, React's just a templating language or something like this." People claim these kind of things where Lars counters this with, yeah, but actually React has state management built in using use state and providers, and it does a better job than giving us a service and say, figure out how to do this with a subject, and now you're all on your own.
Right, and the hooks, when React released React hooks, that's when my interest skyrocketed, right? Because all of a sudden the power really was there that I needed. Mm-hmm. Now, if we go back to the custom hook for a minute, the thing I want to point out. So right now, this custom hook, there's nothing reactive about this. There's nothing that's going to happen asynchronously, and if changes happen inside the wallet that we need to then tell the outside world, right? So the way that the use wallet hook will tell the outside world re-render the component is by changing state with a use state. The use state hook. So the use state hook is a React hook that basically implicitly triggers a re-render, an asynchronous re-render. Since we're not using that here, and we will, then if we did do that, then we would have a hook that was more reactive. But it's still not reactive outside of that view. In other words, what if you wanted to share this data with multiple different hooks, and you wanted the data itself to be reactive? In other words, changes to the data would then let other watchers, other hooks, and other views all trigger. And that's where React Akita comes into play.
Very cool. Yeah. So yeah, this is just all hard coded, and I think we could add some states by making this one in state and have a button that adds a new wallet. But we might just look into Akita straight away.
Let's do this for grins. Let's now add some state in here for the wallet list. Okay. Mm-hmm. So we're not going to So we're going to say const wallet set wallets, and now we're going to say use state, and we're going to use the generic to tell it what. There you go. Perfect. Now here's the trick. You don't want. You could do that. All right. But the other trick, just like set state or set wallets, is this construction value of use state. Use a construction function.
Oh, really?
Because if you pass in a construction function, it's only ever called once. And that way, if you in your construction function, if you said new facade or something else, it would only be called once, because use state only triggers that construction function the first time.
Very cool.
So even if it's just a raw value, you can get yourself into a nasty habit of just using a value. So I almost always use a construction function, and now you can pass in an array, right? An empty array.
Yeah. An empty array. Yeah, we
here's
have
why.
Upstairs. Yeah.
You want to use an empty array. Here's why. Because we're going to use now after line 39.
40 after my, yeah, there you go.
Okay, so now we're going to use effect.
Use effect is like so, and import this one.
You'll need a fat arrow. There you go. Here. Okay, and its dependency is going to be set wallets.
Set wallets, even. Interesting.
Because it's depending upon that setter function, right? It doesn't depend on anything else. Now, inside, we're just going to say promise.resolve. So we're going to make it asynchronous.
Because at some point it will be.
Because at some point we're going to make a fetch or an Axios call. So why not just already build our hook to plan for it down the stream, right? Mm-hmm. So now you can say resolve and then just say wallets. Oops, you can't say wallets there because you called it wallets above. So all the way at the top.
Yeah, call this
your
one
constant
wallets.
Change it to an all uppercase, so it's a constant. Perfect. And then down below, you're going to resolve with wallets all uppercase, and then say .then. And then how would you do this?
Results, and I would say set wallets is results.
Okay, so the reason I wanted you to see how you would do this was this is totally acceptable. However, how would you make it even shorter? What is set wallets taking?
Oh yeah, wallets. So I could just probably do this one.
Exactly. You'd literally do that, and it just works.
Yeah.
Right. And then what I would do is I'd move 37 and 39 all the way through 39 above 34, and so then that's the to-do stuff. No, I'm sorry, 37 through 39 up above line 34.
Okay.
And then, yep, there you go. And then just like that. So now, for those who are first new to React, this can make you a little like mentally like almost feel schizophrenic. Right? You come in the first time to the hook and you initialize wallets to an empty array, and then it returns, and then you resolve, and then you set wallets, and then that triggers a re-render, which comes back into use wallets, and then looks up wallets again, but now we have the modified array. And so this is where it's almost re-entrant, right?
I mean, remember where I said I sometimes have the feeling they should have called it re-render, because I have the feeling it keeps on doing a lot of re-rendering. It might
Use
not
wallet
always
is
do.
called a lot, right?
Yeah.
Excuse me. Your custom hooks can be called a lot, so you have to plan that they can be called multiple times, and that's why you use like the construction functions, and you'll use the setter, and that you have to be careful how you're manipulating your data. That's all.
Yeah.
Okay, so in fact, if we really wanted to optimize this for those purists, 35 and 36, just so should be moved outside for now.
Sure.
And then that way, when use wallet is called multiple times, we're not recreating that.
And if we're going to be purist, these are
There you
constants,
go.
right?
I totally agree.
Let's go ahead and do this.
So now this is looking much more like a real type of approach that we would want to use, right? Because we're online.
One thing, get wallets, and this should return a promise of wallet array.
Okay, hang on 1 second. So you know that you're going to have get wallets. Will you ever have anything that will modify the wallet?
I will definitely have a create wallet that will take.
So then in that case, on line 35, just for now, you can create it right above, but instead of creating a function, create a class called wallet facade. And you don't even need to export it because it's only going to be used here, in this case, within the hook, but later we can rework it, okay? So now we want, and typically what I do is I'll call them with, I always hate get prefix names. Get, I hate that. That's Java-like. And so, and by the way, I wasn't criticizing you. I was being opinionated in a fun way.
I love it. I totally love it.
Okay, cool. Cool. So I tend to call them like, if you're calling, why don't you say load wallets or load all wallets, right? And then we'll come back to that. Now let's create another one, which is save wallet. Mm-hmm. And then maybe, go ahead.
I have a way to create a wallet, which creates a new one, which creates a key for you. And I have one that's an import wallet, which takes actually your key and uses this wallet. So you either have a key already that you want to use in this app, or you have no key and you want the blockchain to generate, or not the blockchain, but you want the app to generate your key and then use that. So there's a difference between whether we're importing or creating. So when you import a wallet, you import with a key. Mm-hmm. So then I would call it import wallets by key, because then you're really being explicit here, or which is that, you know, that you have to have a key, right? Yeah. Load wallets is nothing. So load wallets, we know that it's going to return an array of. So by the way, this is a facade, which means it should never. In this case, this facade isn't going to be managing state, because where's the state going to be currently managed? It's going to be managed in our hook. In the hook. Yeah. Later we can move it out, and we'll talk about that. But for now, and this is where I want to, so we can get rid of 41 through 43. Yeah, let me copy this one over so I don't lose it. Okay. But this is what we want to put here. Right. So if this is, by the way, not managing state, and it's not managing other facades and other things, then it's really not a facade. It's more of a service. Sure. Right? Yeah. And the reason I say that is a service should always have a promise-based API. So why don't we now call this a wallet service? And I did this deliberately, by the way, so we could talk, you know, we could explore the nuances of them. So create wallet is going to do that, and import wallets by key will do that. Create, there you go, exactly. And now your promise resolve wallets. Yeah, so let's make this one so that TypeScript is at least happy. Oh, it's not even happy with this. Let's pick this one up and return this here. So this is now mocked, basically. Mm-hmm. And then return here, we can just return a promise resolve that returns an empty object, because all the fields are optional anyway. I think I missed a parenthesis, a closing thing, and this should be here. Right. Now, the great thing about having this type of service is this later you loaded these from a remote
endpoint or REST service or anything.
Mm-hmm.
You could also have data transformation things in here before create wallet or load wallet ever returned. Like you could transform the data.
So I think actually import wallet is a great example of this, because we take a private key, we actually run it through our, let's say, blockchain SDK, and this will infer the public key. So public key is always inferred from the private key. And it's like with GPG, I guess, or with SSH. And this is kind of nice, because this is how it actually happens. Before I go out and actually save this to wherever I want to save this, I'm going to take your key. I'm going to figure out if I can generate a public key out of it. I'm also going to check if this public key is actually valid, if it has like certain length, or if it's like certain character set, like it should be base 58 in this case. It's kind of a detail, but it does drive home the point where if I import a wallet, I just accept a key, and I'm going to do some magic, depending on whatever blockchain you have, and then I'm going to actually save this key with the key and maybe a name. I'm going to say wallet 5 or wallet 6, depending on how many you have.
So in that case, if you're probably inside import wallet by key going to be doing some other asynchronous activity, then let's set the stage properly. Line 44 should return new promise.
Yeah.
And you're going to pass in a function that takes, there you go, that second one, resolve and a reject.
And a reject, yeah, because it also can go wrong. Resolve, reject.
Right, okay. And now you can resolve for right away with your empty thing if you want, but now you're set up to actually, you're not returning it. You just have to resolve it.
Really? I always returned the resolves. Let me infer public key from secret. And actually, I should not call this key, because that's not great work. Just return. Okay, I always return my resolvers.
We should probably look that up, but I thought it was just you call the resolve function, because it's like a callback saying, "Hey, promise, resolve with this."
It might be because I'm generally always returning.
I don't think it hurts to return it if you want to, but I don't actually hover over resolve. Does resolve, is it a, it does a void, so return does nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And by the way, it was a good example of me not proving one value or not. It was me learning too, right? Like I couldn't remember.
Very cool.
Okay, so now let's do this. So now this is playing in really well. So now in our wallet, let's do the following. Let's create a new use state.
Inside the use wallet here.
We're going to go const service, angle bracket service, no setter is equal to use state. The type is a, what'd you call it? A wallet service, yep. And a construction function that returns a new service instance.
I love it. Now I see the magic of this.
Okay.
Yeah, I really like this. I've been fighting this exact same thing with some external database, class-based. And I was like, why can't they provide a hook? I'm in hook world now. I don't want to be dealing with classes, but this is the way.
See how it just fits in? And it fits in with the ecosystem of React, but the layered approach that we like from Angular.
Yeah, I love it.
Now, we have something else we need to do. Use effect, we want to call the service inside use effect, right?
Yeah.
So we can just say service.loadWallets. .then, just like you had before.
Yeah, then pass in the method without any other stuff.
Now our dependencies change too, right? Because now we have two dependencies, don't we?
Service as well.
So what I love is that I really feel that the people that designed the hooks in React really gave this a lot of thought. It just feels so intuitive and comfortable once you understand some of these requirements, right?
Yeah.
Like for example, if you didn't put in a dependencies array, then one of the things about use effect is it would be called every single time. If you put in an array that's empty, it's only called the first time. If you put in an array that has arguments, it's called whenever the references to those arguments change.
Very cool. Yeah. This was definitely something that was hard to wrap my head around initially, and also because of my way of diving into this, just start writing it, not hindered by reading any documentation up front end. It's like, oh, this is simple, I can use this. But this one is a huge one, and because I was already thinking when we were writing classes, I was like, okay, how are we ever going to initialize this without running into issues there? But this is pretty elegant. And
now let's talk about this for a minute. In an Angular world, the first thing I would say to you is, no, we can't do it that way. What we'd want is to add a provider that will provide an instance of the wallet service. Because what if the wallet service needed the network information to be injected in? So before you create a wallet service, you have to get the network information, and before you can inject the wallet service, it has to be insane. You know what I mean? So in Angular, we would provide it, right? Yeah. This is not the React provider. This is an Angular provider, and so they're very different.
DI provision, the
DI provision, yes.
Provider. Yeah.
So with the Mindspace IO library, you now have DI, and we could, and I think maybe you and I should come back on a different show and show you how you can use this with DI, because you could set up a global DI instance, an injector instance. You remember how Angular had something called an injector?
Totally, yep.
So you can create an injector instance that doesn't actually instantiate any services or anything. It's just an injector that's ready, and you can provide that in the context of React at a global level, and then any hook could look up the injector and say, hey, injector, get me an instance of the wallet service, and it would automatically build it for you.
That's awesome. Yeah, honestly, I'd love to have you back on, maybe even next week, if you're up to it. Same time, same hour. We can do basically the next version, because I also think you had to like go in a little bit.
Are you kidding? I'm having so much fun. I got 10 or 20 more minutes.
Yeah, same here.
If you want to hang on, I could keep going.
Yeah, me too, for hours. I'm totally fine. I'm learning a lot, and I think the crowd is also enjoying it. Although Lars is the only one that keeps on chatting. Highly appreciated, Lars. I'm gonna a few highlights. B-Man's actually listening to my rants. Yes, I do listen to the rants. I might even agree with some of them. And I wish we had more like this in Angular. I agree. I would love to have a use state. And actually, I once gave, like, I don't know, Saturday afternoon, I gave a go at building a use state hook as like a decorator, where I was like, hey, do a decorator, use state, pass in something. And then I lost type completion. And right now, I think I should have used like what they use in NGRX creator functions. This will correctly type my my properties. But I wasn't aware at that point, and I kind of lost interest. But this is super elegant, folks. This is really, really, really nice stuff.
The other great thing I love about it is we're still using best practices. We're still using a layered approach. Yeah. We haven't built yet a reactive state engine, but we do have a hook that will update the UI. And if we look at the UI again, it's a one-way data flow now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like it's using the hook to get the wallet. What happens here is the first time the wallet is called, by the way, it actually then checks to see, and let me be clear, the first time it's called for this component.
Yeah.
So if we go back to the hook, one of the downsides to this is that it's, if it's called by another component, that other component will also create a wallet service that's not shared.
Yeah.
So if this is where the DI comes into, that if you want a wallet service that's shared because maybe it itself has some own other data, then this approach still doesn't get you there. You need to use DI. The cool thing, though, going back to the view, is we've loaded the data in. We're rendering the data. We're passing some data into the wallet list item to be rendered. That guy is just. It manages a local state, right? Because it has a toggle. Mm-hmm. It's not using a hook because, I mean, the purist could say everything should be a hook, but I don't believe that, right? Like if you go into wallet list item, use state as a hook. It's the lowest level atomic hook you can get, right?
Yeah.
So in this case, there's no need to create a custom hook that wraps this because it's very clean. You have two lines here. Actually, you have one hook, and then you have sort of a delegator function, which is line 17. It couldn't get easier than this.
Yeah, and maybe even, so one of the reasons I did this is that there's two ways to toggle this. I have the item itself, and I have this little cute thingy here. I might even do it in line. I might not even need a specific method for this extracted out.
Well, what you certainly, so now you're getting into this issue about event bubbling, and React has this thing called synthetic events, and if I recall correctly, synthetic events don't bubble.
Right.
And so if you could put a click handler on line 20,
Yep.
and then it would handle clicking anywhere in there to toggle if you wanted to. You know what I mean? So it's like it's a parent container toggler.
Yeah, but what I was suggesting, I might as well do it this way. I don't even need to have a separate method for it.
I actually would not do it that way, and here's why. Because look at, you've added complexity to the template itself with this setter function and the predicate function inside. It just feels more complicated.
Yeah, you prefer having a line here that is expressive and
well, think about this. Now imagine you wanted to pass in the event itself, and you wanted to do something like event.current.target or event.current.target.value or something like that. Well, you could do that, but you wouldn't want the whole thing in line. So that's where you have to decide the style that you like that keeps your views clean, but your logic simple.
A lot of nuggets here, and I think you have, I'm not sure if Lars was already a fan, but he is already, he definitely, let me show this one on the screen.
Preach, Lars. Thanks, Lars. I do tend to preach. I need to stop. Sorry.
No. This is highly appreciated. I
cool.
A ton. And I'm a huge fan of having an opinion and sharing these opinions, specifically when you can like defend them. It's not really defending, but if you can explain why you do certain things, and that up until now it all makes pretty much sense. So yeah, no, definitely don't stop preaching, at least up until now. Not the biggest fan is what Lars says.
And you're also, it looks like you're using Tailwind, which is kick butt. That's awesome. I love Tailwind. And then finally, before we, you're going to totally laugh, B. What did we get where you wanted to get? Now, Chow is going to say, hell no, we didn't even get the React Akita. And I recognize that. But if we hadn't done this, then going to the next stage wouldn't have been as useful.
Yeah. Actually, Lars and I had, I think, 3 sessions about NX structuring NX workspaces. It's one of the best sessions up until now on my stream because I learned a ton of things. And we just kept on adding more things because there's more things to talk about, and we really had to understand the issue. And yeah, so I'm definitely interested in having you on another time and do this, make this right. One of the nice things maybe to know, this is the web app. Actually, I think I have it open right here. Yeah, I got it open right here. Look at me being productive. Actually, I got the same app on React Native. And this is going to be unsurprisingly, but at some point, these are both going to live in the same workspace. I don't right now because I have separate people working on this. But what you can see here is that it's very similar to what I do. You have a list of Reacts, and you either create one or you import one. And my eventual goal is to have shared logic, let's say the use wallet hook, and where I store my wallets, a lot of the logic can be shared. But then on React Native, I want to use async storage, and then on the web, I want to use local storage. So there's a little bit of difference there, maybe a different wallet service.
Does React Native support hooks?
It does, yeah.
Okay, so if we go back, by the way, so I love where you're going with this. It actually is inspiring some thoughts. The
Cool.
The cool thing about NX is you can move a lot of this code, which we haven't done yet, to a library, and that library can be used both for the native and for the non-native React apps, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you go back to your to the code we were working on and go to the hook itself, the other cool thing is your service. So this is a service that's essentially it's got an intuitive API of load, wallets, and import and create. That's essentially a layer between you and the REST endpoint, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Could be GraphQL, but right now let's assume it's an HTTP, it's a REST. If you want to start doing things like, okay, I may want to cache them in certain places and invalidate the cache and do things like that, then what you would do is you'd probably, and this is where the layering comes in, is I would probably create a wallet facade that internally uses the wallet service, but has logic. The facade then manages where it's going to cache.
Yeah.
And then your hook now wouldn't use the service directly, it would use the facade directly.
Yeah. And where it's kind of like the interface. It's the contract we make between what are we ever gonna request, what are you ever gonna give me, and now how you do it. This might be interesting for you, but it's not for the rest of the app.
Correct. And the API we have for our service could be very different from the API we have for our facade. Right? It's just depending on what we need.
Yeah.
But you can see how your code can evolve, and almost be like composing things like an onion, like layers and layers.
Yeah.
And then later on the next session, so I think we should come back next week. But later we can talk about the Akita version. So with Akita, the great thing about Akita is it allows you to have all the power that you would get with NGRX. So RxJS and streams and subscriptions and observers and observables, all that, and selectors, memoized selectors, all of that available outside of Angular. Akita is completely platform agnostic.
Oh.
Now, what I wrote was a layer for React that allows you to create, the API is very simple. It's a create store API. And it gives you back a hook. And when you create the store, you specify the state or the view model, which properties you want and what methods you want. And it internally uses Akita to handle all these things about queries and memoized selectors and RxJS observables and all these things. And so that means that your store is non-UI.
Yeah.
It's not even a hook. In other words, it can be used anywhere in your application.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I'd love to explore this. And actually, so this is the actual monorepo. And if you look at this, it's kind of small because this is not my presenter editor. This is just where I work on. But what I do here already is separate it out in data access feature, UI, and util. So here I do best practices of NX. And I'm going to add, so this is mobile, this is the React Native app we see here. I'm going to add web, which is the web app I'm going to be adding here. And this is kind of it for the project. But at some point, I'd love to have an Ionic app here. And I don't really care if it's Ionic Angular or Ionic React. Might be Ionic Vue. I have zero experience with Vue, so that might be a cool way to go. I would love to use the same state management for all these three apps. And if that's Akita, it's most likely going to be one of the contestants that's going to be able to do this, work in all three major frameworks.
So there are, from my experience, and maybe there are others, but there's only two that are agnostic. I haven't checked with NGRX in a while. Obviously, NG stands for Angular. But there are two observable libraries for reactive libraries out there, Akita and MobX.
Yeah.
And for those of you who have not heard of MobX, what an amazing library it is. The way it's under the hood, it's completely non-trivial, but it is an amazing approach to doing, to basically observing, making objects observable and being notified of changes to that data in an optimized way. It's radically different from Akita.
Yeah.
If you're more familiar with NGRX and RxJS, then in fact, Akita is based on RxJS. So if you don't know RxJS, it can be intimidating.
Yeah.
But what the cool thing is for my wrapper around it, you don't have to know RxJS.
Just consume it.
You just consume it, and then you pass in a selector, which is a predicate function, which is here's out of this state, the structure that is the entire state object. I only want these bits. That's the selector. And under the hood, it handles all these things about setting up the streams and the memoized selectors and emitting it and everything.
Very cool. Lars names a few more X state.
Okay, yeah. The state that's based on state machine, right, Lars?
Yeah. Yeah, finite state machine and mini RX. I think this got mentioned in the Angular Discord maybe yesterday or today. And Redux observable.
So I am not a fan of Redux at all. I've seen too many projects descend into chaos because of Redux, and I'm highly opinionated about it. I apologize in advance, but you'll never hear me promote Redux.
And I was not attempting to do. I was intending to do this.
Yeah, you deliberately slid off screen when I said that.
Yeah, no, we cannot have negative thoughts. We can totally. No, I think what I really like about Redux, as more of a concept or a theory, it kind of set a whole movement of tools like NGRX that got inspired of it. So I think in that sense. But when I first saw it, and I kind of had the same with NGRX. When I first saw it, I wanted to use it everywhere. And then I made so many mistakes that I basically teared it all out. And I was like, okay, I prefer to do a lot of stuff manually and just call in this function manually and just make sure it works because it's imperative and I can understand this and we can reason about this. And yeah.
Right, with Redux with actions, it can be hard. Now, the beauty of Redux, right, is that there's a reducer that processes the actions. The thing is that Redux out of the gate is synchronous. And if you want to handle asynchronous things, then you either have to have a thunk middleware or use, you have the pattern that has asynchronicity built into it, like NGRX.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think what makes it confusing for me with the last app that I worked on, which is actually it might be the other wallet or yet another wallet, because I've studied tons of wallets over the last few weeks. It uses sagas, which is a concept. Okay, that's just a term, but and then it uses generators and it yields all over the place. This is things I'm not used to seeing. I'm not used to working. It's also kind of hard to wrap my head around. And when I see it's like, oh, please don't add all this stuff to my app. And when I see this use state, I'm blown away. I love its simplicity. And Akita.
Hang on 1 second. I apologize.
Yeah, no worries. So looks like you guys kind of jinxed it with the comment that we're not going to talk about Akita, but that's not going to be talking, at least no coding.
I apologize. I have to get the door. I apologize.
Yeah, no worries, Thomas. No worries.
I'll be right back. Don't hang up.
Yeah. So yeah, pretty interesting stuff so far. And we didn't get to talk about Akita just yet, but I'm totally sure that will happen next week. And I learned a ton of things. And I'm going to actually quickly share my screen again and just promote the library for those that didn't check it yet. I'm going to go to Reactive Akita.
My apologies. I have a senior daughter who's going to prom, and I had to accept a dress delivery. Otherwise, I would be dead.
That's way more important than any state management library out there.
Well, now you know why I was freaking out. It's like, I got to get the door.
Yeah, I haven't heard an as good excuse yet, so that's
Thank you. Thank you.
No, perfect. No, I really, really enjoyed the session, Thomas, up until now. It's been super, super interesting. And
awesome.
I love your opinion, and I love also the open-mindedness of which you tend to look at all these things and form your opinion on. Something very valuable. Lars he keeps on chatting. I really appreciate all this input. Beam is now React Padawan. Actually, I've been playing around with React since it got launched. I think 2014. I've been playing around with it forever. It's just that most of my clients that I up until now used Angular, so I really like Angular as well. So, but yeah,
React is, by the way, going into the corporate world in huge waves. It's just amazing how much demand there is for React developers.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I think like half of my revenue last year was React code. So it's basically 50-50. And this project I'm doing is other client work, but also what I think best thing you can do as a developer, the worst thing you can do is marry to one technology because these things fade away. And the best thing you can do is just experiment, look out of the box, and look at the thing that kind of makes you scared or that makes you wonder, does this really work?
I would agree with you with one little bit of caveat. If you're playing with 2 or 3 things, pick one that you want to focus on and get good at it before you start trying to get good at the others, and then get good at another one, and then get good. You know what I mean? Because if you don't dive deep enough, you don't appreciate the nuances.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I've been dabbling my toes in Go. I really like Go for the backend, and I really love its simplicity. And there's a lot to like about it. And one of the things, the feedback loop you have while developing, it's so amazingly fast compared to Webpack compiling your whole code base basically.
With Go.
With Golang,
so,
Go.
You know, the funny thing is, Matthias Niemala, who is the architect for the animations at Angular, so he's no longer with Google. He's actually now at Reddit, and he's working with Go and React and actually some machine language stuff. So it's amazing where you can go from the Angular platform and springboard with all your skills into other areas.
Yeah. And I've been liking Go so far, and I've been doing experiments. But if I have to build a client project, I'm going to go back to Nest because that's what I've been working with for the last 2 or 3 years. So that's going to be, I'm going to be the most productive in Nest by far. Not even like irrelevant how fast Go my feedback loop is, just figuring things out. And for instance, Vue or Svelte, I did the tutorials. I did a course here and there. I checked it out on a weekend. But I wouldn't be happy. I wouldn't feel confident selling a project to my client working in Svelte because I have I need to make a lot of mistakes in it before I feel like
that's right.
I can sell my my work here.
So here is a little hint of what's coming next week then for Chow and Lars and others. So part of the really cool thing about this library is, granted, it's not the solution for everything, right? But the thing that I do like about it is not only is it Akita based, and not only does it let you build a reactive store, it also supports, just like Vue, this concept of watched properties and computed properties. So you can define those on the fly, or not literally, but I mean, you can define them in a really intuitive way. And we'll show that next week too, I hope.
Perfect. Yeah. Super nice. I'd love to have you back. We'll discuss the details, but I guess same time, same place.
Is today Wednesday?
Today's Wednesday. It was.
Okay, I think that should work.
Awesome. I'm just gonna knock a part 2 on the image I had, and we'll promote that.
Okay.
And then,
that sounds really good.
Oh, awesome. And then we can maybe do a soft promise that we really will use Akita next time.
Well, we definitely will use it. The question is, will we use it? The challenge will be for you and I to bridge from what we've currently done to using the library, the Create Store, in a way that shows value, right? Because sometimes if your state management in React is not complicated, then a reasonable argument would be that I don't really need the store that Thomas has because they're almost equivalent. And next week, I'm going to show examples of both, where there's normal React hooks and a custom hook, and then there's the store. And for simple stuff, you're going to say they're almost one-to-one similarity in terms of complexity. But I'll discuss why the reactive one is better in the long term, and then we'll look at more and more complex things.
Awesome. Cool. Looking forward to it already.
All right. Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot for being here. It was a great show. And thanks, everybody. And we'll see you in the next one.